They thought they had time. The ground had trembled before, and the mountain had always gone quiet again. Children played in the streets, merchants argued over prices, and wine was poured as usual. Then the sky darkened at noon. Ash began to fall like snow that burned the skin. Breathing turned painful. Day collapsed into night. Pompeii did not die in an instant. It suffocated slowly, trapped between faith, disbelief, and a volcano that erased mercy.
Don't forget to subscribe. Click on the bell so you don't miss the releases. Write your favorite story in the comments.
On the morning of August 24, 79 CE, Pompeii awoke to ordinary sounds. Cartwheels rattled over stone. Bakers lit their ovens. The smell of olive oil and bread drifted through narrow streets lined with frescoed walls. Vesuvius loomed above the city as it always had, green and quiet, its slopes dotted with vineyards and farms. To the people below, it was not a threat, but a landmark, a constant presence folded into daily life. Small earthquakes had shaken the region for years. Walls cracked, statues shifted, wells dried and refilled unpredictably. Yet Pompeii endured. The Romans were used to instability. The empire itself was built on uncertainty. Priests offered reassurances. Philosophers spoke of natural balance. Most citizens dismissed the tremors as nuisances rather than warnings. The mountain had never erupted in living memory. Danger without precedent felt unreal. By mid-morning, a deep rumble echoed from the earth. Some described it as thunder trapped underground. Others compared it to wagons crashing endlessly over stone. Animals panicked first. Dogs pulled against their chains. Birds scattered in chaotic spirals. Then the summit of Vesuvius split open. A towering column of ash and gas punched into the sky, climbing higher than any storm cloud, blotting out the sun as it rose. From miles away, sailors saw it forming, a dark pine-shaped cloud spreading outward. In Pompeii, people stopped in the streets and stared upward, shielding their eyes as daylight dimmed into an eerie twilight. Ash began to fall softly at first, like gray dust settling on roofs and hair. Children laughed and tried to catch it. Adults frowned but remained calm. No alarm was sounded. No evacuation was ordered. The ash thickened. Pebbles followed. Pumice stones rained down, light enough to float briefly, heavy enough to bruise. Roofs began to sag under the growing weight. The air grew hot and dry, burning throats with every breath. Still, many stayed. Homes held valuables, food, memories. Leaving meant abandoning everything to an uncertain road, and certainty, even false certainty, felt safer. By early afternoon, Pompeii was wrapped in darkness. Lamps were lit as if night had fallen at noon. Ash clogged streets and courtyards, piling higher with each hour. People wrapped cloth around their faces, praying, coughing, shouting for family members lost in the haze. The volcano roared continuously now, a sound like the sky tearing itself apart. Some fled toward the gates,
Others ran to the harbor, only to find the sea pulling away from shore, exposing the seabed in a terrifying retreat. Boats capsized. Panic spread faster than ash. The city was no longer a place of stone and order. It had become a trap. Above it all, Vesuvius continued to rise, indifferent, unstoppable. What had begun as inconvenience was now catastrophe, and worse was still coming.
As afternoon collapsed into a choking dusk, Pompeii's streets became rivers of ash. Each footstep sank deeper than the last. Pumice stones bounced from rooftops, cracking tiles, smashing courtyards, blocking doorways. Those who had stayed indoors now faced a cruel decision: remain and risk being buried alive, or flee into a city that no longer had paths, only shifting gray dunes that swallowed ankles and knees. Families tore their homes apart, searching for valuables they could carry. Coins were sewn into belts, jewelry was stuffed into mouths and tied beneath cloaks. Parents wrapped children in blankets soaked with water, hoping damp cloth might filter the air. The ash burned eyes raw and scraped lungs with every breath. Coughing fits turned into vomiting. Some collapsed simply from trying to breathe. Roofs began to fail. Wooden beams groaned under impossible weight before snapping without warning. Entire rooms vanished in an instant, crushed beneath tons of falling debris. Those who survived the initial collapse clawed at the ash, screaming for help that could not reach them. Neighbors could hear the cries, but could not dig fast enough. Every second spent rescuing one person risked death for all. Outside the city, the volcano continued to feed its towering column. Lightning flickered inside the cloud, unnatural flashes illuminating the darkness. The air smelled of sulfur and burning stone. Ash fell faster now, no longer drifting but pouring, as if the sky itself were collapsing. Pompeii was disappearing layer by layer. At the harbor, chaos ruled. The sea churned violently, retreating and surging in unpredictable waves. People pushed toward boats, fighting for space that no longer mattered. Sailors cut lines and fled blindly into darkness. Others were knocked into the water and vanished beneath waves thick with floating debris. Escape by sea was no longer possible. The mountain controlled land and water alike. Those who ran toward the city gates fared little better. The roads beyond Pompeii were buried, unrecognizable. Wagons lay overturned, animals suffocated where they fell. Ash storms erased all sense of direction. Some ran in circles until exhaustion took them. Others collapsed against walls, too weak to continue, slowly entombed where they sat. Night brought no silence. The roar of Vesuvius intensified, punctuated by explosions that shook the ground. The sky glowed faintly red above the mountain, an omen few understood. Many believed the gods were punishing the city. Prayers echoed through the darkness, desperate and frantic. Temples filled with bodies clinging to statues that offered no protection. By late evening, Pompeii was buried under several feet of ash. Doors could not be opened outward. Windows vanished. Entire neighborhoods were sealed alive inside their own homes. The city was no longer dying by fire or stone, but by air itself.
Suffocation became the executioner, slow and merciless. Yet the deadliest phase had not arrived. The eruption was changing. The towering cloud above Vesuvius was beginning to collapse under its own weight. What would follow was not ash, but something far worse, something that no wall, prayer, or flight could stop.
Shortly after midnight, the nature of the disaster transformed. The towering column above Vesuvius could no longer support itself. Gravity took control. What descended upon Pompeii was not falling ash, but a wall of superheated gas, ash, and pulverized stone, moving faster than any human could outrun. The first pyroclastic surge slammed into the northern edge of the city with a sound like the sky tearing open. Those still alive never saw it coming. There was no warning roar, no visible wave to flee from. One moment there was darkness and choking air. The next, everything ended. Temperatures soared beyond what flesh could endure. Lungs burned instantly. Muscles locked in violent spasms. Bodies collapsed where they stood, frozen mid-motion. Death came in seconds, mercifully faster than the suffocation that had claimed so many before. Inside homes, entire families died together. Some were found huddled in corners, arms wrapped around children. Others lay near doorways, hands still clawing at stone thresholds that had already sealed shut. In the streets, people fell forward as they ran, preserved forever in final desperate strides. Animals died in their stalls, tethered and helpless. Pompeii became a city of statues shaped by terror. The surge passed, leaving silence so complete it felt unreal. Ash continued to fall, settling over bodies still warm beneath the gray blanket. Then came another surge, hotter and denser than the first. Walls collapsed, upper floors disintegrated, the remaining spaces of air were erased. What little life had survived the initial wave was extinguished without resistance. Further surges followed, each one sealing the city deeper beneath layers of death. Pompeii was no longer recognizable. Streets disappeared entirely. Buildings lost their shapes, reduced to buried voids that would one day become tombs. The weight above crushed roofs inward, preserving outlines of beds, tables, door frames, and the people who had once used them. By dawn, the volcano's fury began to ease. Vesuvius still smoked, but its violence had spent itself on the buried city below. Pompeii lay beneath more than 20 feet of ash and debris, invisible to the world. Birds did not fly overhead. No sound rose from beneath the ground. Life had been erased so completely, it was as if the city had never existed. Days later, survivors from nearby towns returned cautiously. They called out names into the silence, listening for any response. None came. Attempts to dig were abandoned almost immediately. The ash was too deep, too heavy, and the smell of death rose from below. Pompeii was declared lost. The mountain had claimed it entirely. Centuries would pass before the city was seen again. When excavators finally uncovered Pompeii, they found not ruins, but moments, human lives interrupted without mercy. The ash had preserved expressions of fear, pain, and surrender.
Pompeii did not burn, it did not crumble slowly, it died instantly, violently, and completely, sealed beneath the mountain's final breath. What remained was not just a warning from nature, but a frozen echo of humanity's final hours, waiting in darkness to be remembered.
For nearly 17 centuries, Pompeii remained sealed beneath its gray shroud, unknown and untouched. Above it, new fields were planted, roads crossed the buried streets. Generations lived and died without realizing a city slept beneath their feet. Vesuvius stood quietly in the distance, its slopes green and harmless in appearance, as if it had never destroyed anything at all. When the first accidental discoveries were made in the 16th century, workers digging canals struck stone walls and painted surfaces. What they found confused them. Frescoes of gods, rooms filled with ash, strange hollow spaces where objects should have been. Yet these discoveries were dismissed, reburied, and forgotten. Pompeii would not truly return to the world until the 18th century, when systematic excavation began. As ash was cleared away, something unprecedented emerged. Pompeii was not a ruin in the traditional sense, it was a snapshot. Homes still contained furniture, shops still held tools and coins. Graffiti covered walls with jokes, insults, political slogans, and love notes. Loaves of bread remained inside ovens, carbonized but intact. Wine jars stood sealed, labels still legible. Time had stopped in the middle of ordinary life. The most haunting discoveries came later. Excavators noticed empty cavities within the hardened ash, voids shaped like human bodies. In the 19th century, plaster was poured into these spaces. When the ash was removed, figures appeared. Men shielding their faces, children clinging to parents, people curled inward in instinctive defense. Their final moments were preserved in exact detail, down to wrinkles in clothing and expressions of agony. Pompeii revealed truths that ancient texts never recorded. Most victims did not die slowly from suffocation, as once believed. Many were killed instantly by the extreme heat of pyroclastic surges. Bones showed signs of thermal shock. Teeth were clenched. Hands were locked in rigid spasms. Death had been swift, brutal, and inescapable. The city also revealed how people responded when faced with the unimaginable. Some fled, others hid. Some gathered valuables, others stayed together, choosing comfort over survival. There was no single human reaction, only countless individual decisions made under unbearable pressure. Pompeii preserved all of them without judgment. Over time, the city became a bridge between past and present. Visitors walked Roman streets worn smooth by ancient footsteps. They stood inside homes where families once laughed, argued, and slept. Pompeii transformed history from abstract gates into lived experience. It showed how fragile civilization really is when confronted by forces beyond control. Yet Pompeii is also a warning. Vesuvius still stands. Millions now live within its shadow. Modern technology can monitor the mountain, but it cannot tame it. The same earth that nurtured Pompeii destroyed it without hesitation. The city's silence speaks to every generation that listens. Pompeii did not fall because of ignorance or weakness. It fell because nature does not negotiate. In its final hours, the city was not sinful, decadent, or doomed by fate. It was simply human, alive one moment, gone the next. What survives today is not just stone and ash, but memory.
Pompeii forces us to confront how quickly everything familiar can vanish. Its streets remind us that disaster does not announce itself in time, and its victims, frozen in their final seconds, remind us that history is not distant, it is human, fragile, and always closer than we believe.
As excavations expanded, Pompeii began to reshape how historians understood the Roman world. Before its rediscovery, daily Roman life was reconstructed mostly from elite writings, senators, poets, emperors. Pompeii told a different story. It spoke for bakers, slaves, prostitutes, shopkeepers, children, and migrants. Its walls preserved voices that history had long ignored. Graffiti proved especially revealing. Political slogans urged citizens to vote for local candidates. Crude insults mocked rivals. Love notes declared devotion or betrayal. Some messages were poetic, others obscene, many brutally honest. They revealed a society loud, opinionated, humorous, and deeply human. Pompeii was not a silent classical ideal. It was chaotic, vibrant, and alive. The city's brothels challenged modern assumptions about morality. Erotic frescoes lined the walls, not hidden but displayed openly. Prostitution was regulated, taxed, and integrated into daily life. Beds were small, stone-built, functional rather than romantic. Names and prices were scratched into plaster. Pompeii did not hide desire, it documented it plainly. Religion, too, appeared less rigid than imagined. Shrines to household gods stood beside imported cults from Egypt and the East. Temples honored Jupiter, Venus, Isis, and Apollo within the same city. Faith was practical, transactional, and flexible. People prayed for protection, profit, fertility, and health, not abstract salvation. The amphitheater revealed another truth. Gladiatorial combat was not rare spectacle, it was central entertainment. Bones found nearby showed repeated injuries. Graffiti celebrated favorite fighters like modern sports stars. Violence was normalized, ritualized, and cheered. Pompeii showed that cruelty and amusement often coexist comfortably within prosperous societies. Yet, alongside brutality, there was care. Skeletons showed healed fractures and medical treatment. Surgical tools were discovered, precise and advanced. Public fountains provided clean water. Sewage systems functioned efficiently. Pompeii was not primitive. It was organized, engineered, and thoughtful in ways that rival later civilizations. The tragedy also forced scientists to rethink volcanic disasters. Pompeii became a laboratory frozen in time. Researchers studied ash layers to reconstruct eruption phases. Bodies revealed how heat affects human tissue. Buildings showed how shock waves travel through streets. Every detail helped improve modern disaster preparedness. Ironically, the same ash that killed Pompeii preserved it better than any monument. Organic materials survived that would normally rot: wooden doors, food, textiles. Pompeii became the most complete ancient city ever discovered, not because it was great, but because it was buried instantly. Still, Pompeii continues to disappear. Exposure to air, rain, tourism, and pollution slowly erodes what survived 2,000 years underground. Walls collapse, frescoes fade, footsteps grind ancient stone into dust. Preservation now races against time, just as evacuation once did. Pompeii's legacy is not comfort, it is confrontation.
It strips away the illusion that progress guarantees safety. It shows that complexity does not equal security. A thriving city with wealth, art, and engineering vanished in hours. Pompeii endures because it refuses to let the past feel distant. It forces modern eyes to meet ancient lives face to face, and in doing so, it asks an unsettling question. If this happened to them, why not to us?
In the final accounting, Pompeii is not remembered only for how it died, but for what it revealed about humanity itself. The city's destruction exposed the fragile contract between civilization and nature. Romans believed they had mastered their world through stone, law, and empire. Pompeii proved that mastery was an illusion, maintained only until nature decided otherwise. Modern visitors often walk its streets searching for drama, the casts of victims, the collapsed roofs, the sudden silence. Yet the deeper tragedy lies in the ordinary moments frozen in time. A loaf of bread left in an oven, coins still clutched in a fist, a dog straining against its chain. These details reveal not panic, but interruption. Life did not end heroically or poetically, it simply stopped. The final hours were not universally chaotic. Evidence suggests that many residents escaped early, guided by instinct or experience with earthquakes. Others stayed, paralyzed by uncertainty, responsibility, or hope that the worst would pass. Pompeii reminds us that disasters do not strike a single type of victim. They strike people making imperfect decisions with limited information. Pliny the Younger's account, written years later, remains the closest voice to that day. He described darkness thicker than night, ash falling like snow, people calling out for loved ones they would never see again. His words carry a quiet terror, not exaggerated, but restrained, as if language itself struggled to contain the experience. Without his testimony, much of Pompeii's human dimension would remain silent. The city also reshaped how societies remember catastrophe. Pompeii became a warning embedded in education, literature, and science. It taught future generations to read landscapes, to respect geological history, to recognize that calm ground may hide violent potential. Volcanoes were no longer myths or divine punishments. They were natural forces demanding understanding. Yet, even with knowledge, the lesson remains unresolved. Cities still rise near fault lines, coasts, and volcanoes. Prosperity still blinds populations to long-term risk. Pompeii's story repeats itself in different forms: earthquakes, floods, fires, each time framed as unexpected, each time revealing familiar patterns of denial and delay. Archaeology continues to uncover new rooms, new bodies, new stories. Advanced imaging reveals voids beneath the soil where humans once stood. Technology allows scientists to reconstruct faces, diets, and movement. Pompeii is no longer just a ruin, it is an ongoing conversation between past and present. There is also an ethical tension. The city is a graveyard, yet it is also a destination. Millions walk where thousands died. Preservation balances education against exploitation. Pompeii forces modern culture to ask how tragedy should be remembered, displayed, and shared without becoming spectacle.
Ultimately, Pompeii survives because it speaks honestly. It does not glorify empire. It does not soften death. It presents life as it was, messy, unequal, hopeful, flawed, and shows how quickly it can be erased. No epic battle destroyed Pompeii. No invading army burned it. There was no enemy to fight, no victory to claim. There was only ash, heat, and time. Pompeii's final hours were not the end of its story. They were the beginning of a warning written in stone and shadow, still visible 2,000 years later. A reminder that beneath every thriving city lies the same fragile truth. Nothing human is permanent, and survival is never guaranteed.